of the Committee on Planning, Development, and Transportation. This is a public hearing on dockets number, oops, this is still my old one. This is a hearing on dockets number 0338 through 0342 and 0775 through 0777, appointments to the Audit Committee for the City of Boston, as well as the Zoning Board of Appeal. I want to remind everyone that this public hearing is being recorded and broadcast live on channels Comcast 8, RCN 82, and Verizon 1964, as well as streaming on the City of Boston website. So please silence your cell phones and other devices. We will take public testimony if there's any interest throughout the hearing, so please sign up at the sign-in sheets at the door. These matters are sponsored by the mayor and were referred to the Committee on Planning, Development, and Transportation. So apologize for the technical reading, but I do need to read each docket separately into the record, and then we can proceed with our nominee for the Audit Committee. So again, the subject of this hearing is confirmations of the appointments or reappointments to the Zoning Board of Appeal or the Boston Audit Committee. Docket number 0338, appointment of Nadine Fallon as an alternate member of the Zoning Board of Appeal for a term ending July 1st, 2021. Docket number 0339, appointment of Bruce Bickerstaff as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeal for a term ending July 1st, 2021. Docket number 0340, reappointment of Mark Fortune as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeal for a term ending June 1st, 2021. Docket number 0341, appointment of Joseph Ruggiero as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeal for a term ending July 1st, 2021. Docket number 0342, reappointment of Christine Araujo as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeal for a term ending July 1st, 2021. Docket number 0775, reappointment of Craig Galvin as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeal for a term ending March 1st, 2022. Docket number 0776, appointment of Edward DeVoe as an alternate member of the Zoning Board of Appeal for a term ending July 1st, 2021. And finally, docket number 0777, appointment of Catherine O'Neill as a board member of the Audit Committee of the City of Boston for a term ending November 1st, 2020. So what we will do, I think we'll have several portions. We'll start with the Audit Committee, have an introduction of the overview of that committee, and then hear from the nominee. And then after that, I think we will proceed to the nominees for the Zoning Board of Appeals. I think it makes sense to start with the reappointments altogether first, Neil, and then we'll move to the new appointments after that. And again, throughout there will be public testimony opportunities, and I do have some communications, emails, letters of folks who had various questions for specific nominees or in general that I will share as relevant. So thank you so much. And Councilor Edwards, would you like to make any opening statement?
Thank you. I want to apologize for being a little bit late in between meetings, but I'm particularly excited about this hearing because I think it's a moment and time for a lot of folks to really hear from members of the ZBA, hear about how they're applying standards for variances, hear about, and also just generally to reflect and understand how they're being seen, I think, in many neighborhoods. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm looking forward to seeing a commitment to making sure that there's a certain level of independence and assessment and how that's going on and looking at variances that are given out. I think that there's a true concern, and many cases are starting to wonder if even planning is worth doing and participating in some cases because of the fact that so many times the neighborhood has spoken and feels ignored. So we're going to go through those processes and those questions, and I think it's a dialogue that many people in the city are looking forward to.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. We're just doing opening statements at this point for my colleague, Councilor Baker.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Zachem? Councilor Flynn?
I'm fine.
Okay, great. Mark, would you please introduce
Sure,
the committee and Catherine?
Sure. Good morning, councilors. My name is Mark McDonald. I'm with the Auditing Department, and I'm here today with Catherine O'Neill, who's being put forth to fill the remainder of a term on the Audit Committee for a member who was unable to fulfill the whole term. So The term would be expiring November 1st, 2020. The Audit Committee provides oversight to the city's internal and external audit activities. They meet on a quarterly basis. They are chaired by Larry DeCara. It's an independent committee, a 5-member committee. With this appointment, the committee will be full, will consist of the 5 members. Generally, they're appointed for 5-year terms, and they report to the mayor and city council, generally in writing on at least an annual basis. So that's a general overview of the audit committee.
Thank you. Catherine, feel free to introduce yourself and maybe to start as a statement why you're interested in serving on the committee.
Sure. My name is Catherine O'Neill. I have been a resident of the city of Boston my entire life. I am privileged to have been asked to serve Mayor Walsh in any capacity, and I would be privileged to serve on this committee.
Thank you. So we just had very brief introduction of the committee and of the nominee, and we'll go to colleagues now for questions for Ms. O'Neill. Councillor Edwards?
No questions.
Councillor Baker?
Question for you. So audit committee, does this committee audit all income coming, taxes, all of our nonprofit money that comes in, so everything all in?
They have oversight over any external audit that's performed.
Oh, okay. So they're not dealing with tax money or anything like that, it's just external
Well,
money?
only to the extent that it's being audited, then
To make sure
yes.
the money's being spent correctly and,
So they would have conversations with the external auditors. Currently, that's KPMG. And they would talk about the work they are doing and, flag anything that was an issue.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Zachem? Councillor Flynn?
I just want to say I have known Catherine for many years. She has an excellent background, excellent education, and has contributed so much to not just to Dorchester, but to the entire city of Boston. So I know Boston will be in great hands with Catherine's experience, hard work, dedication, working for the people of Boston. So I'm going to be proud to support Catherine. So I just want to say keep up the great work, Catherine.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Flaherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark, thank you for the work that you do on behalf of the city. And Catherine, I know Catherine personally. I can attest to her commitment to her family, to her community of Dorchester, and to our city. And I know she's going to do a great job in this capacity, so I'm happy and proud to support her candidacy today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any closing statements or other thoughts you'd like to offer? Okay, great. Thank you both very much for your time. We really appreciate you being here and your patience. And then we will transition to the nominees for reappointment to the Zoning Board of Appeal. So, Neil, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I have reappointment nominees as Mark Fortune, Christine Araujo, and Craig Galvin. Am I missing anyone? Oh, and of course, Mr. Bickerstaff. And in the meantime, I wanted to read a letter into the record from City Council President Andrea Campbell. Dear colleagues, regretfully, I'm unable to attend today's hearing on dockets number 0338 through 0342 and 0775 through 0777, a hearing regarding the confirmations of the appointments or reappointments to the Zoning Board of Appeal or the Boston Audit Committee. I thank Councilor Wu for her leadership on this topic and look forward to reviewing updates and next steps. Sincerely, Andrea Campbell, Boston City Council President, District 4. Okay, welcome. Oh, so Jeff is back as well to do the overview and introduction, and then we'll hear from each of our, I think maybe what makes sense is, let's see, how we're doing on time. I think if we can go, each candidate, well, you could do your introductions, we'll ask you any questions, and then each candidate can introduce themselves, maybe a general statement on why you want to be reappointed, and then if there are individual questions, we can kind of target one by one or overall. Okay, Jeff, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, councilors. My name is Jeff Hampton. I'm the Senior Zoning Planner at the Boston Planning and Development Agency. I am not a staff member to the Zoning Board of Appeal. However, I am the agency's, I guess you could call it liaison to them. The BPDA is tasked with making recommendations to any appeal that goes before them. The Board of Appeal is also under the same enabling act as the Boston Zoning Commission. Their job is to hear appeals from the Boston Zoning Code, also the State Building Code, in terms of whether or not a proposed project that does not meet the underlying zoning requirements is worthy of getting a conditional use permit or a variance. I have been involved with this body for a very long time, and I know that the work that the board does is painstaking. It's very critical to the development and the protection of the city. One thing I would like to add about this board is that they do not sit up there on Tuesday mornings. They actually, and just listen to testimony and read what's in front of them. There are site visits. There are site visits daily, so that they can actually get boots on the ground and see how a proposed project that is before them would affect that community. So right now, the 4 reappointments before you, I would highly recommend that the committee recommend their reappointment, because I think they have a firm grasp on development in the city and each neighborhood individually. So with that, I would give it back to Madam Chairwoman for any sort of comments.
Okay,
and I'd
great.
be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to read this section in, or at least summarize, because it's a little complicated as well, and we have so many candidates from various categories. So I think, as with the zoning commission, it's the same exact language and categories, is that correct, Jeff?
No,
Slightly
the
different?
Board of Appeal, I think, has 7 sitting members at their hearings. They do represent, again, a vast,
Okay, so I'm gonna, so if everyone would bear with me, I'm gonna just quickly read through the ZBA's enabling statute. 7 members and 7 alternates, appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council in the following manner. 1 member and 1 alternate member from out of 4 candidates nominated by the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. 1 member and alternate from 4 candidates nominated by the Boston Society of Architects. 1 member and 1 alternate from 8 out of a pool of 2 from the Master Builders Association, 2 from the Building Trades Employers Association, 2 from the Associated General Contractors of Mass, and 2 from the Contractors Association of Boston. 1 member and 1 alternate out of a pool of 4 nominated by the Building Trades Council of Greater Boston. 1 member and 1 alternate selected at large by the mayor, and 2 members and 2 alternates selected by the mayor, each of whom has served for at least 1 year as an officer or member of the board of directors or similar governing body of a residential neighborhood organization, which is a nonprofit organization primarily of residents of a specific neighborhood with at least 25 members that allows any resident of the neighborhood to join and has a principal purpose of the preservation of the quality of residential life in the neighborhood and has been in existence for at least 2 years. Or you could be, you could have served for at least 1 year as a member of a residential neighborhood organization which has been established by the mayor and consists of residents of a specific neighborhood and has as principal purpose the preservation of quality of residential life in the neighborhood. Provided that any person appointed from a residential neighborhood organization under this section is also a resident of that neighborhood represented by the organization. And the 2 members from these neighborhood organizations shall reside at the time of their respective appointments in different city council districts. the 2 alternate members shall reside in different city council districts as well, and all members and alternates must be residents of the city of Boston. Okay, so Jeff, could you help clarify which of these reappointments falls under which category as well?
Actually, Madam Chairwoman, I'm not staffed with the zoning board of
okay.
appeal. I'm
all
staffed
could-
with the BPDA,
Yes,
so.
great. Thank you then. We'll then proceed directly to the nominees in whatever order you wish. We'll start with.
I'm Christina Raujo. I'm a resident of Rosendale. I have a master's in city planning, and for a number of years, I worked as a planner at the BA. I've served on the Zoning Board of Appeal for the past 20 years, most recently as chair. I'm here representing, I'm the mayor's appointee for this position.
Good morning, my name is Greg Galvin. I'm appointed by and approved with the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. I live in Dorchester. I think we have a change of address that we might need to do. But I've served on the board. This will be my second appointment, and look forward to moving Boston forward and growing the city. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bruce Bickerstaff. I am serving as the community resident position appointed by the mayor. I currently reside in Mission Hill area of Boston, and I've been on the board, on the zoning board, for over 10 years.
Good morning, councilors. Good morning, Madam Chair. Mark Fortune. I am sitting on this board as the Building Employees Association, Tom Gunning. Also a business agent with the Sprinkle Fitters Union for 32 years, 17 of which as an agent. I live in West Roxbury, grew up in Dorchester, moved to Jamaica Plain, never left the city. Proud graduate of the Boston Public School System as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to questions from councilors. Councilor Edwards.
Thank you very much. So, as I understand, so you're the at-large candidate?
Yes, the
Chairwoman?
mayor's appointee, yes.
And so, and I just want to make sure, so at-large, the Greater Boston Real Estate Board appointee, community liaison, and the
Building Employees Association.
Building Employees Association. And I thought that was, I wanted to thank the chair for bringing that out, because we had a lot of questions about whether there's a conflict of interest and whether you have this and so on and so forth. You were actually appointed to represent certain perspectives on the ZBA. So I wanted to make sure that that was very clear to a lot of the folks who wrote, myself and the other counselors. What I would also like to go through now is for you to walk me through how you come to your decisions. Because I think one of the, and I'm just putting it out there, the flurry of emails and phone calls I got about this particular hearing is that the ZBA is not actually assessing and going through and applying the standards for a variance, which, and if I may be wrong, and I'm happy for you to correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that they are to look at the conditions of the topography, to look at substantial hardship, and to see that without that without this variance, there would be substantial detriment to the public good. Those are the standards I understand for a variance. Am I missing anything? So in many cases then, we have seen that there's a great deal of variances that are giving out. And so what I would love to hear, and maybe we can work down from each one of you, how you apply those standards when you are looking at a variance.
Sure. For me, I think one of the important pieces is a site visit. And as members of the Zoning Commission did speak to was the desire to maintain neighborhood character. So I think that's one of the important things. The Zoning Commission also talks about, the zoning code talks about health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Boston. So those are the lenses that I look at. We listen very closely, as you know, to testimony that's given in support or in opposition to a project. And that's why I think if you know, listening to us, you'll see that I ask people to give new information every time they're up there. I think the barriers or the tests are set very high, because I think the topography of the city, if you look at that, most of it is dealable, except when you get to cases of putting stone or very steep slopes. Most of the city is buildable. If you look at hardship, we do not do a fiscal test on hardship. That is irrelevant to our conversations in every way possible. So we do look at the merits of each case. We, as you've seen, we really try to understand what the opposition is based on, and we really try to reach an equitable decision. And I know that every time there's a lot of people who are unhappy with our decisions. And we recognize that, every time I go to a community meeting, because I still do go to community meetings, not specifically as a Board of Appeal person, but as wearing my regular job hat, and I hear about that. But I also have people come up to me and talk about the way they felt heard at the meetings, even if we did vote in opposition to their concerns. They felt heard. They felt they had a way of expressing their thoughts. They felt that through the provisos, we did try to address their needs. Thank you.
Mr. Galvin?
Craig Galvin, it's a great question. I'm actually thrilled and honored to be in this position and take this job very seriously. It for me, is a culmination of all of the input, all of the site visits, all of my experience in the city of Boston, and input from neighbors and input from residents of the area that helped me make the decision to go forward, with any case. What I like about this job is that it is each case is on its own merits, and I've learned tons and tons and tons about the neighborhoods and people's passion, and I've also understood that people's passion for development is very dividing and very distinct. It's either people are really happy or they're really upset. And as Christine said, it's been an amazing experience for me to be able to work through that process and to be open-minded and to understand that this process is important to the growth of the city and smart growth in this city. And I've been, again, I'm honored to be on this committee and honored to work with such great councilors as you guys, and to also understand that neighborhood input is important, and that wants and needs of this city are important also. Thank you.
As it has been stated, Bruce Bickerstaff, I'm sorry. As it has been stated, my place is to, I believe, is to find a balance between community needs, public safety, and the needs for this development. There's a balance. When I say need for development, as a community person, I recognize that they're in proposed developers or individuals who want to develop otherwise, that there is a balance. I don't think as a member of the zoning board I can allow someone to be denied a right to develop, if you will, as it balances with the desires, as Mr. Galvin just said, of the communities which are being changed in these developments. So I find it somewhat difficult in ways, but to balance the desire of the communities and the desires of folks who want to come in and develop, and particularly in residential areas. So, but I do appreciate the fact that I'm able to be part of the renovation of particular neighborhoods. In my neighborhood with urban renewal, there was a particular scourge, and some folks have accustomed themselves to seeing open lots, but I think that there is a place for a better reuse of the land, and hopefully I can be part of that. Thank you.
Mark Fortune. I'm the secretary. Obviously, I read into the docket the violations, the purpose. One of the things that I really listen to is the testimony, the mayor's office, the councilors, their representatives there. obviously the community. What's been said, I think, Christine put it perfectly, to add something new to it. I think everything's been pretty much said, but we do look at the merits of the project. Again, not everybody's always happy. I live in West Roxbury, and there's a few developments out there that, people are coming to me and say, you sit on the zoning board of appeals, how can you approve something like that? It just doesn't look right for the character of the neighborhood. But, we look at what the merit of the project is, and we do a lot of site visits, to going out there, making sure the community is happy with that. Now, not all the time that they are, unfortunately. Nobody wants to see it in their backyard, I guess is the old saying. But I think pretty much what everybody has said up here is the way we look at things on the merits of the project. And, I think I've been quoted a few times, I think in the newspaper, where some of the violations have been 2 pages long. And the project's been approved. But again, it goes to testimony and how we look at it, and basically the merits of that project. Thank you.
So I want to make sure that we're doing multiple rounds for everyone. And I know there's a lot going on. Councilor Flaherty had been here before and then stepped out, and now is telling me he has another time commitment. I don't know if colleagues would be interested in, willing to let him defer to get one question in. Is that okay? Okay, thank you, Councilor Baker. We'll do quick question from Councilor Flaherty and then back to the original order.
Thank you for the courtesy, Councilor Baker, and through the chair. Obviously, it's great to see everybody. I know we've worked together for many, many years. We don't always agree 1,000% of the time, but I know I can speak for each of you, your character, your integrity, your community involvement, how proud you are to be Bostonians, how excited you are about the future of our city, and the front row seat you guys have every Tuesday in helping us and the folks that elect us and the folks that we call family, friends, and neighbors as we shape the future of our neighborhood. So that said, obviously, I would like to see some more denials at times. I'd like to see some approvals at times. Again, you don't always bat 1,000 up there, so I know the tough position that you're in, because we are too. And to sort of to harken back to my former colleague, the late, great Brian Honan, Councilor Honan hated going up there on Tuesdays because he said he would win one neighbor's support and he'd lose another neighbor's support. So it always, bothered him that he, and if you knew him personally and you knew his character, he enjoyed helping people. And that's a tough spot to be in when you're an elected leader and you have to pick between neighbor A and neighbor B. And so, again, I can understand and appreciate the difficulties you have up there. One point of thought, I know that oftentimes projects get deferred, and this is probably more of a function maybe administratively, but the folks don't get re-noticed, and I've always had a problem with that. So neighbors get noticed, or if there's an Office of Neighborhood Services sends out the leaflets and the flyers to have an abutters meeting or a community meeting, and then you're kind of grinding it down, and then you get up there, and then there's a deferral or a motion for a deferral. And that's my understanding that so the abutters don't get re-noticed of that. And I just think this sort of 2019, we should be able to send out another mailing notice, because it's not like they get a date the following week. And again, that's just a little sort of a pet peeve of mine, because then what happens is people say, well, geez, I knew that it got deferred, but I didn't get a notice of the new date, and people have to take time off of work and get daycare and what have you. And then they just get sour, and they think that the cake was baked, or they got hoodwinked, or someone's playing games, and that kind of just casts a pall over the process, and we know that that's not the process. So again, footnote, and maybe that's through, I don't know who it's through, maybe through the chair, or if it's through Jeff's office, but just another ask from this council that when a matter gets deferred, that sort of a new round of mailings or notices go out to the applicant, to the proponent, but also for the direct abutters, just so that, everyone has a fair shot of coming in and being heard, and they may or may not be able to make the next date or not, but that said, so I'm proud to obviously support your reappointment. Look forward to working together again as we continue to shape our city, and also go on the record. I don't remember a time serving on the council when we've actually had a representative from East Boston on the committee, at least my tenure here on the council, and I could be wrong, but no person or name jumps out. And so I'm proud to offer support. There's 2 gentlemen that are in the audience that will be coming up after you folks. I have to step out to a previous engagement, and that's Joe Ruggiero and Edward DeVoe. I can speak about their commitment to the community. I've known them many, many years. I know their families. I know how active and engaged they are in all facets of their community and the neighborhood. And given the significant amount, and I think Councilor Edwards can speak to this, given the amount of development that is happening in East Boston. It's now sort of the new sort of hot place, if you will, that everyone's trying to do what they've done in other parts of the city, my neighborhood included, to have, two individuals willing to serve, but also being able to represent their community and the city in that capacity. So I'm proud to also support Joe Ruggiero and Ed DeVoe, along with the folks that are in front of me. So thank you for the work you do, and look forward to continued success and work together. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your work that you do on the zoning board. Christine, maybe it's you, you're the chair. Can you explain, so is there no different role between the at-large and the real estate or the labor? There's no different role, it's just you're coming from that stakeholder area?
Yes, I think we complement each other in many ways, because I think as we question the applicants, we bring a little different viewpoint to the question. So, no, nobody raises their flag and says, we are so-and-so, but there is a level at the question level that we are very specific about the types of questions we ask.
Okay, and you mentioned a little bit earlier, and I'm not picking on you, you're the chair, so a little bit earlier you talked about the hardship, like, so the variance is supposed to be, or sometimes what we hear, they're supposed to prove hardship. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that may mean? Because you also said that you don't really deal with the hardship end of it. Can you tie that together for me, maybe a little more?
Yes, there's the hardship of building versus the hardship that I need to make a financial gain on this project. We do not pay attention to that financial gain because it's not relevant to us.
On the proponent's part? On
the proponent's part, because all of us, I think, as Boston residents, are concerned about how our neighborhoods grow, how they evolve, et cetera. So we come with that specific viewpoint, which may be different from a developer who may or may not live in the city and who's looking to maximize his or her profit. So we try to really keep clear of those discussions and really focus on the project and not at all on the financial piece of it.
So when the team comes in and says, we spent $14 million on this, we need 900 units, we don't really...
We don't care. We are looking at the number of variances they request, the density that they're proposing, the parking or lack thereof, all those things that go together to make a community work.
Yeah, and thank you. So the last time I was at the board, it was, and you mentioned it earlier, how you try not to let the same point come back up, and I was speaking in favor of a project, which I still think is a great project, and there are probably 12 people lined up to say the exact same thing, and I could appreciate that you let 2 or 3 of them say what they had to say, and then you cut them off. Didn't cut them off, but you were firm.
But Tuesday does feel like a mental marathon to all of us, I think, because, we have to pay attention, we have to engage, and we sit until we get through our cases. So, we are alert the entire time.
Yeah. We talked about different role. Mark, did you go to Tech? You said it was Boston. Was it Boston Tech you graduated from?
Unfortunately, my school is no longer here. It's Jamaica Plain High School is now English.
Oh, my high school's not here either, so
Right.
See what happens to us. So and I just want to make more of a comment. So I've been on here, I'm in my 8th year now. My first 2 years, we may have had 5 or 6 appeals in 2 years. And then, so this last, I don't think, a lot of the angst around the city is just the amount of projects that are coming through. But I also can look at it in a sense where my neighborhood was one of those neighborhoods that was totally looked beyond. There was no investment going on. Nobody even painted their house when I was a kid. So now to look around and see new windows going in, because as we have investment in my neighborhood, does come with some I think challenging byproducts. I think, speaking for my neighborhood, District 3 looks better, and a lot of that is due to your stewardship in making sure that that these projects do fit in with the fabric of the neighborhood, and we are talking about how they interact with the community, so I appreciate that. And I don't necessarily envy your role. You could probably say the same for my role. So, thank you, and I will be supportive of all of your applications.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor Baker. Counselor Zachem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for your work. I think my colleagues have all said it's not an easy job that you all have taken on in the interest of the city and your fellow residents, so thank you for that. It is really incredible to see, just in the 5.5 years I've been on this body, the growth of development, the booming economy of the city of Boston. A lot of that ends up in your hearing room and before you. And I think, each one of you, in my experience, has done a phenomenal job of balancing those competing interests of, trying to make sure that neighbors of some of these proposals are heard. And I believe, Madam Chair, that you said this, and maybe some of the others did as well, that everyone needs to make sure they have that forum to have their voice heard, and not always going to go their way. And I feel similarly, whether it's I'm up there, whether I'm in front of other bodies, whether I'm in front of some of my colleagues on the city council. But if this is going to be a city based on transparency, based on community, making sure everyone does have the opportunity to be heard is so important. So thank you for the way you're doing that, and thank you also for being so thoughtful on these issues. It is very easy to just say no, to just give in to, I think, sometimes a avalanche of calls and emails and from some of us and others. And if we did that, the city would not move forward. We would not be growing. So I want to thank you for that and for your hard work. I do have one question, though, and it relates to our continuing growing industry of cannabis in the city of Boston. And we're at sort of a point right now where things are getting thrown into your lap, sometimes into ours, without a lot of clear guidance. Can you speak broadly to how you're evaluating that? Have you addressed, the issues or some of the issues around if multiple applicants in the same neighborhood are coming before the ZBA? How is this working? Is this something that's in process right now? Because I'll tell you, I hear about it from my civic associations, from my neighbors, from proponents of some of these projects. Is there anything you can shed light on your approach to that?
May I answer?
I'd like to
on
defer
behalf?
to Christine as the chair.
Over the years when I've sat on the Board of Appeal, there have been many applications that have come through which we've approved. Not all of them mature into actual construction. You know that. So as far as and because we know that we have one project, at least one project ahead of us, I would like to give them the courtesy of a due process to hear through what they have to say at the hearing in July. So I'm trying not to predispose this board in any way, but to keep an open mind to their proposal and their application.
Yeah, I won't belabor the point, but I will just say, and I realize this is not your responsibility. This is rather, the situation has not been created by anything you've done. It's a somewhat unintended consequences of, I think, a good progressive piece of legislation. The one thing I do often hear is that a lot of our civic associations, at least in my district, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, feel very challenged in that they feel like it's a race to the ZBA, and they want to make sure they have the opportunity to vet the applicants. And again, maybe I think there's a legislative solution more than putting it in your lap, but to the extent moving forward, it can be a situation where maybe every neighborhood is going to be heard at the same time, on the same day, that sort of approach. And just to put that in your ear, because I think the residents I represent, even the folks who are against cannabis, acknowledge the fact that these entities and these dispensaries are coming to all of our neighborhoods, but they do want to still play their traditional role, whether it's a restaurant, a bar, a new development, in evaluating that and sharing their views with the governing agency.
And I think what we try to do is be thoughtful, because we do ask about security, we do ask about waiting areas. As I've driven by the facility in Brookline, I've noticed how they've tried to accommodate their lines off the street and into the sidewalk. So we ask all those questions because they're important to quality of life in any neighborhood, be it highly commercial or less commercial. But, those are the things we pay a significant amount of attention to.
Well, thank you. With that, I also have another engagement, but I do look forward to supporting these reappointments. I want to thank you again for what is an often thankless task, so I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Councilor.
Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor Zachem. I had one question from someone, a constituent on social media, just wanting to know what weight you give to community feedback as your way. You all mentioned several factors that you consider. In your head, is there kind of a template of, 30% this, 30% this, 30% this, and how do you decide in what situations when to take how much of community feedback?
So-
Go ahead.
I guess it's tough to gauge, and obviously, individuals come in, speak in the room against a particular project. You may have someone that speaks, gives a different view. 3 or 4 people are on the same topic, but there's another individual, he's upset about parking. So I'll gauge as a member. I'll just gauge that, take the testimony into account. Obviously, we're in variances. If they're within, the rule of being able to support or not support, I also look at that.
And I concur. It's sometimes difficult for people who have other things to do with their time, neighbors, come in with complaints and weighing their complaint against the regulations and requirements for zoning. It's tough to say, well, as long as this is not broken, I can't really involve myself. Or when I say involve myself, I mean I can't vote against or for a particular development. So I concur with my fellow zoning board members.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what people typically see in the Zoning Board of Appeal hearing room is a snapshot of what really the whole process is. And I think that, our site visits and our commitment to listening to people and being open-minded and our understanding of different neighborhoods and their approach, and I think that that has been beneficial to all. I think Christine does an amazing job at balancing 47 people wanting to speak in opposition to something, and balancing those acts. And I think that as we have seen in the city, this is a very divisive situation. Anything to do with development is divisive. I mean, you can stand at a coffee shop and somebody can complain about development in their neighborhood, and you can say to them, okay, what are you talking about? And they say, well, someone's trying to put 28 units on this lot. And then you can turn the other way and the other person can say, I agree with you, someone's trying to build a single family next to my house. It's a very hot button issue, and we take into consideration our experience, our understanding of the city, and our understanding of how the process works. And we do know by the time they've gotten to us at the Zoning Board of Appeal that there's been a thorough neighborhood, robust process.
And if I may, we work as a team, but we make our decisions as individuals. I think that's important and key as well. We make every effort not to share our view of the elephant, if you will, and make it based, each of our decisions based on the information that's given us.
Just to pick up on what the rest of the team has spoken about, is that I don't think we can, take a pie chart and quantify it. We do spend a lot of time listening carefully, and in some cases, the only way to get clear resolution is through provisos. And we are not shy about doing that. Putting enough provisos in place on a project that will protect neighborhood residents when there is merit to the project itself. So we try to walk that fine line and listen carefully, but also make a valid decision.
I'd like to add one point, Councilor. Thank you for your time. One of the things that I've enjoyed most about this board is our investigatory status, so that we have the ability to ask questions of people. We have ability to, go to the neighborhood. We have ability to speak to other people in an investigatory manner, which has been very helpful to me during the process because, people will approach us and say, I don't know why you did this, and I can ask questions of them, and that has been a fulfilling part of this job. Thanks.
Got it. So I just had two questions of my own that I'm going to ask together, and feel free to just address them together because I know we want to keep moving through, and Councilor Edwards has another round as well. What do you think your role as a member, a ZBA board member, is in addressing gentrification and displacement, and how would you approach a reappointment for a new term differently than you have for in your tenure so far?
Those are hard questions to answer because I know that's physical displacement. I cut it more finely and look at cultural displacement because I know a lot of that is happening in our city. And it's something I think about a lot. And I think we rely on tools that the city has in its toolbox, such as inclusionary zoning and other tools to ensure that as many residents as possible stay in the city. I also know that the CDCs, we see a lot of projects come through the CDCs, which really prioritize affordable units. So I think as a group, we rely on other tools to really address those issues because I think we do not have the authority to actually do anything be above and beyond that.
And what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? I don't know. I mean, because every time I sit at the Zoning Board of Appeal, intellectually I'm challenged with a question that's different, with an approach that's different. And so I think that for me, I have to be constantly, really paying attention, really being constantly updated on what the current zoning is, the new articles that are being processed, to really understand what their requirements are, such as the East Boston iPod, for example. Their requirements are very different from the South Boston iPod in certain ways, and it's incumbent on me to really keep up on those amendments that come through.
I would feel the same way as my fellow board member and obviously chairwoman. I think every project, that comes in front of us is looked at differently. South Boston iPod is 1,000, anything over 1,000 square feet. And then you get the East Boston iPod. You got each individual or a butter, and in some cases, the abutters may not even live in the community anymore, but own the property, but they're living in Weston or they're living in a very affluent neighborhood. And they don't want to see the dynamics change as well, but yet they really don't live here. So I think we look at those things, equally and different. I'm a city person. I was born here, I'm going to die here. That's me. But that doesn't necessarily it's going to happen to everybody that's living in South Boston or Jamaica Plain or Dorchester or East Boston or West Roxbury. So we do look at that. And, obviously my mother's elderly. She's 80-some-odd years old. She's in Jamaica Plain. She's in Boston housing. She grew up here in Roxbury and stayed here. And I want that to happen for my children down the road as well. So I think, Christine put it, it's a tough question. Affordable housing is one thing. Inclusionary as far as, the developer coming in here and promising things and doing things and, hopefully staying on topic as far as that's concerned. So, yeah.
Would you do anything differently?
I'm sorry?
Would you do anything differently this next term?
I don't, again, I don't think I'll do anything differently. Obviously, maybe listen a little bit more intently. I think, Councilor Zachem, we had a situation, I think maybe a month and a half back, where we had some of these dispensaries. I think we had 3 or 4 of them on the docket. It was, a very, very tough meeting to say. I think we don't control that. That's ISD. That's, we have, as a board, have to deal with those situations that arise. So, but I guess my answer would be, again, I would really listen intently and maybe, talk to some of the community members a little bit more. I don't go out to community meetings, just something I just, won't do because everybody hits you. You sit on the zoning board of appeals, and you know this project is a bad project, and I have to say to them, I'm looking at the merit of the project. I know that you don't want to see it happen next to you or in your backyard, but it is what it is. And you know, if somebody has an opportunity to build something, and I think Councilor Baker put it in good perspective, people are now fixing up their homes and making them look very good, and the community is growing, and that's also a good thing. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
And, in my case, I think of having the authority to follow up on promises that developers make. I don't know if that's, in my position, that's a doable thing, but if I had a wish list, that would be one of the things. Because we hear and we judge on the promissory that a developer makes, whether it's building units or maintaining affordability within the footprint of their development. I don't know if there's enough follow-up to make sure, or if they're putting their money in a fund to build affordable housing, if those things in fact happen. And I think it would, if I had my desire, that would be something I would like to see at least monitored.
I think one of the questions you asked was, what would we do differently? And I think that that's a good question. As some of my colleagues have spoken about, is their passion for the city of Boston, and I too share that passion. I raised my family here, and it's a very, very important place to me, and it's an important place to make sure we have smart growth. I think that displacement and those kinds of questions about affordable housing and AMI and what's affordable and what isn't is not up to me. That's up to somebody else. My job is to come to this board with an open mind, to come to the meetings every Tuesday with an open mind, and to be able to listen, but also be flexible. I think that that's where my experience in the real estate world helps to understand kind of where trends are going and what's going on, because it's a very unique argument to have to say that we want to make some units affordable in a development, but we don't want density. You know what I mean? It's a really big struggle, and from a perspective of investment in the city, it's important to understand those things, and those are the things that I watch and stay on top of, because I see them every day in my world, and I think it's important for us to be open-minded. And when you said, would I change anything? No, the only thing that I would change is to continue to be passionate and continue to understand people. I spent a lot of time in the community as where I grew up in Dorchester, and I'm passionate about the things that are the city of Boston. I'm passionate about making sure people are treated equally and fairly, and I'm passionate about making sure that we help people that need help. Those are the things that keep me moving, and I think that to be said is that this is an ever-changing board that we're on. What would have been approved 10 years ago is way different than what is today. So to say would I change, the only thing I'll do is to keep my nose into what's going on and keep my thumb on things to make sure I know keep myself educated. So thank you.
Thank you all. Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. So I should have prefaced some of my questions to let you know that they're coming from different buckets, that I wanted to make sure, one, that we were clear in the standards. And these buckets are kind of driven by the questions and concerns that people had, and I thought it would be unfair to go granular into each project. I just wanted to pull back up and say, so there's questions about procedure, there's questions about conflict of interest, there's questions about public involvement, and then there's just my own education where I do need some help with you explaining how you guys are looking at some things. So we had gone through the first bucket on the questions of procedure and your variance and how you look at them. And I still wanted to follow up specifically on one of those prongs, because I think you had mentioned you have tools in the toolbox, I think, and one of the best ones you guys all, I think, talked about was the investigatory tool. And honestly, the best tool is the fact that you are sitting there and the developer comes to you to ask for that relief. So you have that, I think, one of the best tools in the toolbox, which is to just demand information on the spot. And so one of those standards under which you can demand information is a part of your variance, to grant a variance, which is that the desirable relief or the variance that's sought, it will not create a substantial detriment to the public good. And that's where I think under Councillor Wu's question about displacement and gentrification, that bucket, that inquiry into those things, you're right. I don't think you have the authority to stop, say, or measure it. But you do have the opportunity to at least ask the developers, have they considered it? That's a public good issue. So I would hope going forward, for those of you who are returning, that you would at least add that to the questions that you have. So, because public good is your charge to look at. And I think it's great that you are all Bostonians and incredibly proud of it. But the fact of the matter is, I would say majority of the developers are not. They're here to make money, and that's okay. I make money. You need it to live. They also are not here, or will they ever live with the implications of their permanent decisions and what they're building. We all do, as electeds who try to go grocery shopping, as folks in the community. So, inasmuch as you are the gatekeepers, you are Bostonians, you are looking and you are assessing, I think one of the best tools, and also demonstrating that you're hearing one of the concerns of the community, is to ask the question. So I hope in your vetting going forward, especially with the large projects, and you see with the iPod, to ask the question, have you considered what this does for displacement? At which point they can say, yes, we have X amount of affordable. Yes, we talked with the CDC, we looked at this mitigation. But if not prompted, they may not ever bother to have that. So I think with several of the concerns that I'm going to turn to my constituents, I'd love to be able to tell them, listen, this is a large bucket. If we work with the ZBA and just get them to ask some of these questions, no, they do not have the authority to deny based off of the end result. But they certainly have the opportunity to ask those questions. And I think that I would hope you take that leadership on that particular topic and other things of public good. My colleague, Councillor Zakem, brought up cannabis. And as you know, that there was the recent one with the East Bostons. I'm not going to get granular. It's in the past. But I do want to make sure I'm understanding how you're interpreting the half-mile buffer. I'm understanding the administration interprets it for things that are currently existing, and I'm genuinely trying to turn around and tell my constituents what it means. And so if you could tell me how you're seeing it or how you're judging it, because I don't know at this point.
And just for the record, because this was addressed briefly in the last hearing, I think before Councillor Edwards was in the room, all nominees for the Zoning Commission confirmed that their understanding was that it was a half-mile, that the two proposed locations within a half-mile of each other should not both be approved. That the word existing did not mean physically in existence, but that the half-mile radius should apply to any that are being approved.
Okay, so help me. How do you?
Yes.
No.
May I answer?
No, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, each case comes to us on its own merit. We know that the road to getting a license is long and arduous.
For cannabis.
For cannabis.
Right.
And we are one part of it, you know, and so we look at each case on its own merit. So we are looking forward to hearing the next case, the case that had to be rescheduled in July, and listening very closely to what they say on their behalf. You know, nothing is pre-thought, nothing is predetermined. We do want to hear from them because everyone is entitled to a process. And that is what we are holding to. You know, whether it was scheduled first, whether it was scheduled second, not my concern. My only concern is hearing from the applicants, hearing what they have to say, and taking it and considering it there and then.
But, Chairwoman, I agree. And that's your charge. However, I mean, the zoning code is the zoning code, and how you see it isn't up for interpretation on a case-by-case basis. Do you see the half-mile as a standard that when two applicants come within the half-mile, one of them, both cannot exist? Or do you see it as only do we apply this standard when something exists? And that, I think, that consistent viewpoint, that analysis is what I'm asking, how you're going to look at it. So,
Council, I think...
And the only reason why I ask this is because, and I don't mean to cut you off, Mr. Galvin, is because of that confusion. I want to be able to leave this hearing and tell my constituents, I generally don't care where you land on this decision. I just want to be able to say, this is how they're going to look at it, and that's what they're doing.
I actually think you're put us in a difficult position here to answer that question, and I think that we have a case pending in front of us that we can't speak about. And I don't, we're sitting here as an open meeting with more than 3 people here. I am uncomfortable answering that question moving forward with a case sitting in front of us. So that's my stance on this.
Okay.
And I think that's what you're really hearing from me, too, is that there's this level of discomfort that we have not heard fully from the applicant, and we will hear from them, but we should give them a chance to air their project completely. There was a reason it was deferred, and we want to hear them. We can't give you, and we are not comfortable in giving you a hard and fast. Because as I said before, we've seen so many projects, that have come before us asking us for approval. They've gotten the approval. They've never come in to extend their permit. They've never done anything like that. They've just died on the vine. So what we do is we'll look at the project and, see what matures, listen to it, and follow it through.
So, and I'll move on to other questions, but I will say this then on the record. I'm not asking you what your decision will be, because I understand even with current laws, the zoning code, you grant variances to them. That means you do have to look at and assess, we will or won't follow based on these following criteria that we discussed. So that is not challenged. What I had hoped to get was what you're looking at, the law and how you're seeing it. That you won't tell me is, well, this is a decision you decided to make. Now, just moving on to additional process questions. I do know in other cities, one of the things about process that I think might be helpful, and one of the critiques I've heard from the community, is the fact that so many, these hearings are in the morning, right? On a Tuesday, a lot of people can't, or they do have to get off work to come here. And has there been any movement, or maybe in your experience, I think you said you've been 20 years, has there ever been nighttime ZBA hearings?
We do have a nighttime. We do have a mini zoning board on Thursday night.
Those are for the smaller projects?
Smaller
or for,
projects.
Yeah, those are
But for the ones that are on Tuesday, that I hear a lot about, the
Every other
Tuesday ones.
Tuesday.
Yeah. Has there been?
In the past, there was, and from my experience, because Jeff, you remember those days, but the turnout didn't change that much. As far as, resident turnout did not change that much. And for us, we are open to it. We're open to it. But, we feel that, for even on our Thursday hearings, when there are cases that come through, the committee hearings, we have less representation from elected officials, from everybody, and that's kind of disheartening to us at those meetings.
And Council, if you've been to our chambers, which I know you have, you know that we're not only there in the morning, that sometimes we travel on until 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock.
It's all day.
So it's a pretty
It's all
heavy
day.
day for us.
It is. And I'm just, a friend of mine was going through the same process in Brockton. They started at 6 and stayed till midnight. And I understand that what that would mean if you move to evenings. But again, I'm trying to do my job, and as people have asked these questions, I put them in buckets, and I'm just asking you about your thoughts about them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The final on the process is, and I do appreciate that online they have the schedule, the agenda for that day. And I just to echo Councilor Flaherty's question, is there any way to get real-time, immediate changes when there's a deferral? So if the deferral is because I don't think it's updated online. I know that you may not control the online part, but if that's something you can echo to, I don't know if it's Do It or whoever it is in technology, again, and when the date for the deferral is stated on.
I just don't think that's our job. That's
No.
ISD.
Okay, I will check with them
That's something
then.
that they do.
I appreciate that.
Yes, because as you know, we are staffed by ISD. We make, our decisions are made independently, but we are staffed by ISD, and I think the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services does a very credible job also trying to get the information out. it's also helped tremendously that we are live streamed, because
It
then,
does.
you know, it helps residents to understand what the conversation has been and what the date was for the deferrals. Also, we are trying very hard not to encourage deferrals. You may hear me
Right.
say that, because I know it's hard on the community who comes and wants to have their voice heard, to have a project deferred. But, so we are trying to really discourage that and encourage communities and community groups to really front-load their processes, so that we are not waiting for further community conversation to occur.
Moving into the next bucket on conflict of interest. So I'm going to summarize some of the concerns and questions, and then I would like for you to respond to how you deal with conflicts of interest. So concerns about conflict of interest that I received is, you know, and I think this is partly because the community doesn't realize you are supposed to have someone from the real estate industry on the ZBA. So again, I'm echo that I'm happy the chairwoman mentioned that. So they were concerned how you could have someone from the real estate industry on the ZBA. Folks were particularly concerned about relationships with members with the mayor, and that there was a personal relationship or donation to his committee, or that there was some sort of favoritism given to him that resulted in people being appointed. There was a concern about people developing currently in Boston and making money in the industry, so already in the process of and working to make sure that they are developing and moving the city forward and doing whatever, and then as a result, well, naturally they would favor or want variances that they too would one day benefit from. So I don't want you to go through and break down, yes, no, we have or haven't. Just tell me as an individual when you see or how you assess a conflict of interest and what you do.
So we're all subject to state ethics requirements. So we take the training on a fairly regular basis when the system works, because I know I've had a hard time this year actually getting my certificate, because there seems to be an online glitch. So
Yeah.
we do follow those ethics guidelines. We've had ethics training, what was it, a couple years ago?
Yep.
So we have those coming on fairly regularly. So we are held to those standards. I know that we all recuse ourselves if we have a financial interest in a project. We recuse ourselves when we happen to be on a board of a nonprofit that comes before the Zoning Board of Appeal.
Right.
So I know that there are those kinds of very, you know, processes, and we want to create as much sunshine as we can on what our conflicts may be. So you will see us leave the room, state that
I have seen you.
we are recusing ourselves, and leave the room, so that, you know, even our presence there doesn't you know, cast any kind of shadow or anything on the process. So that's clear. And I think as far as the legislation, the zoning code does require us to come from different constituencies. And I think it's all complementary in a certain way, because, you know, I don't understand the depths of real estate, you know, and I don't want to, frankly, because it feels like it's a big hole, a rabbit hole I would go into that I would never come out of if I did start asking those questions. So I rely on people on the board to ask those complementary questions, so that all helps with our decision-making.
Thank you. Anyone else? I mean, you don't have to each, but anyone want to assess conflicts of interest, recusing, things like that?
Obviously, recuse yourself. You know, I sit on the Boston Housing Authority. Whenever there's a project that comes in, I just recuse myself as a secretary, and somebody would take my place and wait till that is over and go back in the room, just making sure you're doing the right thing.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, I'm good.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Councilor Baker, any questions for this group? Thank you. All right, so thank you so much to our nominees for reappointment. We appreciate your time, and feel free to stay if you wish, and we'll move to the final group, which is our...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nominees for new appointment: Nadine Fallon, Joseph Ruggiero, and Edward DeVoe. They were no test. I mean, Okay, so the good news is the same thing applies, so thank you, Jeff, but I think we can go straight to the nominees. If you could each just maybe introduce yourself briefly, your background, and why you would want to serve on the ZBA.
Hello, my name is Nadine Fallon, and I am a resident of Dorchester. I live in the Savin Hill neighborhood, and I'm looking to serve the city of Boston. I've been a resident since 2005 in Dorchester, and actually I've lived in Allston, Brighton, and also the Fenway area during the college years. And then I've worked in the Brighton area also. So I know this various areas of the city pretty well. And from 2009 until 2014, I served at Fields Corner Main Street. I served as the capacity of the board treasurer. I also served on the design committee, helping commercial storefronts improve their storefronts, both through the Restore program and through store signage improvements. And I also own a real estate brokerage. I'm the managing broker. I'm not a selling broker. And I have a daughter. She's 7 years old, and she attends school over at Conservatory Lab on Hancock Street. And I'm looking forward to serving the community and moving Boston forward and making it a place for everybody.
And could you remind us which type of seat are you nominated for?
I'm a at-large.
At-large, okay.
As a alternate.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, councilors. My name is Joseph Ruggiero. I'm a resident of Orient Heights, East Boston. I've been a resident of East Boston all my adult life. I'm a candidate as a community member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I've been a member of the Orient Heights Neighborhood Group. I think I attended my first meeting. I was probably 18, 19 years old. I've been going to meetings regularly for the last 3 or 4 years, and have been the president. I was acting president for starting in the spring of 2008 until currently. Small business owner in East Boston. I own the Ruggiero Family Memorial Home. I've been a member of a bunch of different community organizations, youth sports organizations, the East Boston Chamber of Commerce, and various other groups. I've been an IAG member previously on the Addison Street IAG, which started in October of 2017. I was an Orient Heights appointee to that IAG, and I'm very excited to represent some community aspect and some community thought process on the zoning board.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councilors. My name is Edward DeVoe. I'm a resident of East Boston, lifelong resident of the city of Boston, actually fourth generation. I'm the nominee for the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. I am a realtor. My office is located in East Boston. We do our business there primarily. Prior to being a realtor, I worked for 13 years in the state legislature, starting off as an aide to then Representative Anthony Petroselli, and working my way up through into the Senate, where I served as Chief of Staff for the Committee on Financial Services. I've been involved extensively in the East Boston community. I've served on nonprofit boards, such as the Salesian Boys and Girls Club, East Boston Athletic Board, just to name a few. I am a homeowner in the city as well, and I'm honored to have been nominated, and I look forward to engaging with you. And thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go to my colleagues for questions. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to just do the same thing I did with buckets and just making sure that we're clear about how you see the standard for variance, conflicts of interest, and then public involvement. So I had gone through, I guess, the 4 major components of a variance or granting a variance, and I'm sure you are all fully aware of some of the perspectives that community have about variances in general, having been heads of or involved in your community associations, and how people feel, not all, but a good number of people feel that variances are just given out and that there seems to be no check. So I'm curious how you as new members would balance that and how you would approach the perspective on variances and dealing with community pushback, because it will be a lot. And while your potential future colleagues are battle-hardened and been through up and down all arounds about it, it's not an easy job. So I'm curious how you're going to balance all that. You can go down the line.
Well, I think as a new member, I think the first thing is going to be important to listen to all sides and really just really listen. There's going to be varying modes of conversation. I also forgot to mention that I was on the Jones Hill Civic Association. One of the things that we did, I was the treasurer there, and I also spearheaded the planning committee. And one of the things that we did was create guidelines for coming to the organization for for abutters meetings. So whether you were a homeowner or a developer that was looking to come for neighborhood approval and taking that process, and basically how to approach us and engage the community and shepherd through that whole process to either get to a vote, whether it's an up or down vote. And so we put together a document that said, these are the things that we want from you, the list of violations and how you intend to build the property, what the intended use is, how it's going to impact the neighborhood, and how it's going to impact the people and the residents that are around it, and kind of standardize it so that everybody who came before it kind of ended up with the same results, so that it was kind of transparent, and then everybody would have the same process, whether you're a homeowner or whether you're a developer. And I think it's important to have that transparency and standardization so that everybody was on the same playing field. And I think that that's important, and I would like to kind of bring that to the ZBA so that it's not some man behind the curtain and everybody kind of knows what's going on. And I think it's important to kind of give everybody the same voice and an equal voice.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councilor. I think it's important to review each case on a case-by-case basis and really listen to the community and to their concerns as it relates to the variances that are requested. Our neighborhood specifically, and I say our neighborhood because you live there as well, is inundated sometimes with variance requests and developments. And I've had the opportunity to attend community meetings throughout the city. I worked at Suffolk University for a little bit and attended community meetings in Beacon Hill and Downtown Crossing in the North End. And I worked here in the city in the transportation department and attended community meetings in Mattapan and Dorchester and Roxbury. And the concerns are all very similar throughout the city. Sometimes people don't feel like their voices are being heard. So it's very important, especially in my role as a community person on the Zoning Board of Appeals, to make sure that the community is heard, and also that the community is directing their conversations, the community is directing their conversations to the merits of the variance. And that's an important distinction to make, and being able to sift through that is something, and I look forward to learning a lot through this process, and learning and listening to the residents and to those in for or against specific proposals.
Just to echo a few of those thoughts, I would say, as hopefully a new appointee, my job would be to listen. I think that it's obviously incumbent upon anyone that is taking on a new task to educate themselves to the best of their ability on the issues that will be before us, to engage. One of the things that I've sort of surmised from listening to the board and just from previous knowledge is that while the ZBA appears to have a great deal of autonomy, it seems as though that this is a collective effort from a lot of different parties. The community input, I think, is very important. Obviously, communication with elected officials. I understand how that could be, how that is. I was not an elected official, but I've attended community meetings for years. I have dealt with constituents for years, so I'm very much attuned to that. And as a Boston resident, one of the things that I think maybe a lot of people had mentioned how proud they are to be Boston residents, but one of the things that I think maybe was left out is that as Boston residents, we deal with the development as well. We deal with the issues that go on in our community. We don't jump in our cars and head up Route 1. After this, I'm going to take the T.
And you're going to Santapio, right?
I might. I've been known to go there once or twice.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Hopefully I can get through the tunnel within an hour and a half, and get back home.
Probably not.
Probably not.
No.
So that's just one of the things. And in all honesty, I think I would be putting the cart before the horse if I were to speak more on that. I think that my job at this point, should I be fortunate enough to be appointed, would certainly be to educate myself, engage with the council, engage with the administration, engage with the community and all interested parties, and do the best I can to make a positive impact on the city.
So just going through some of the qualifications on the community membership. Joe, Mr. Ruggiero?
Yeah,
you wait for-
Joe's fine.
Joe, so there's two qualifications in which you can meet the community member or neighborhood group member. One is that you have served as an officer or member of the board of directors for a year. Or the other one is that you are a member of a residential neighborhood organization, which has been established by the mayor. And so which one do you fit under?
So I've been president of Oregon Heights Neighborhood Council, acting president since about the spring of last year. The previous president had family emergencies that came up and just abruptly left. And I was kind of just thrown in as the president, as someone that's been to the meeting for years and years. So it's been right around a year since I've served as that role. I mean, Oregon Heights Neighborhood Council's bylaws are submitted to the Office of Neighborhoods, Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, as a recognized group by the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, and I've been a member of that group for. And I remember specifically back in like 2013, 2014 being a vocal opponent to a project that actually got approval from the neighborhood council and zoning approval and is still not built yet. So I remember specifically about that time being a more frequent attendee. And for at least the last 2 years, I don't think I've missed more than 1 or 2 meetings.
So I bring that up only because of the feedback, and both positive and both expressed concerns. And so if I understand, you're saying that you've been an officer or a member of the board of directors for at least a year.
It's been right around there.
Right.
It's been right around there. I can get like the specific, it's very close.
Okay. And the only reason why is because, again, I don't know when the vote was that made you formally the president?
So that was it. So from my recollection, there was like questions, it all happened so abruptly. So from my recollection, I remember being in a meeting in June and being like, guys, we got to vote on this. And they're like, no, you're just the president. And I'm like, but we should vote. And then we did like nominations in July and then voted in September maybe for like official, where I went from acting to
Actual,
I guess. I mean, I can look that up. But I've been attending that group for.
Well, no, I mean, it's also the mayor's office put you up, so it's standards that they would need to necessarily meet and make those arguments, not necessarily you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been for the second qualification, I've been a member of that group, which is recognized by the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services for at least over 4 or 5 years.
And again, just to let you know, Joe, so I've been asking the mayor's office specifically about how they would show that they have, I think it's meet that has been established by the mayor, and whether this is, again, a conversation from my confusion in education. Are they talking about the CNCs, the neighborhood councils that were established, or what? And so that was the question I still have pending to the mayor's office. But it seems like under 1 or 2 is, okay. So those are the questions. Then there was and I don't know if you want, if Frank, you want to?
No, you go.
Okay. Then there was the group of questions around conflict of interest. But again, I got another set of emails about folks and concerns about members. And again, I'll walk through the categories I mentioned. Working in real estate and developing currently in Boston. Relationship with the mayor. Let's see, what else is there? Continued or, I don't know, previous activities or current projects that may be pending before your civic associations that you're members of. So all of those were brought as potential conflicts of interest. So would you, just like your future colleagues mentioned, how would you deal with conflicts of interest?
Well, as I understand, we go through conflicts of interest training, which I've actually, having been members of various nonprofit boards, I've done before, and I assume that we will do again, so I'll be certified. So it will be a recusal if there is a project that I have an interest in. I don't see an issue with it. I think anybody that knows me can testify that I'm, honest to a fault.
Yeah, I would absolutely plan on recusing myself from any project that I had a conflict of interest with. I took that training that was just mentioned. I took that as a City of Boston employee. I'm very familiar with it. And I would absolutely recuse myself to any of that moving forward.
Yep. I would echo those sentiments. I have been through state ethics training on numerous occasions. If I felt as though something would be a conflict of interest, even on face value, if it wasn't, I would be sure to take the necessary steps and recuse myself from any projects in which there could be any type of conflict.
And then there was the public input, and involvement. And I had mentioned potentially looking at evening meetings and the prior back and forth. And then also, they had corrected me and noted that the actual notification of deferral would be probably an ISD directed. So tell me about what do you think about the community involvement so far with the ZBA? And if you are on the ZBA, how would you improve it, or how would you do it differently about, involving folks?
I think with this day and age with electronic communications, I think that there's definitely been some improvement. I think efforts to, I know that you can get on an email list. I'm on an email list. I get emails notifying me of hearings for projects that are in my community. I think that's great. I think getting the word out that that's available to people will be certainly helpful. I think that there's more that can be done. I think, and this is something above our head here, but I think that ISD could probably use some more resources all around. And hopefully that they can get that, and that can be improved. Notification, I mean, mailings would certainly help. I think right now they go door to door and, tape it on your front door, and sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't.
Right.
That could be improved because they can't stick it in your mailbox. But I think there's room for improvement, and I'd like to see that, but I don't know if that's something we can affect or not. As a constituent, maybe that's a letter I could write, so.
Thank you.
I can echo those same sentiments. I think sometimes, I feel like I stay very well informed because I'm very tech savvy, and I check my emails and stuff, and the complaints I hear a lot in the community are from some of our senior residents that aren't as tech savvy, that aren't on email, that don't get email notifications, and being able to bridge that gap somehow would be something I don't think is under the purview of us, but something that would be interested. I was excited to see the new postings that are happening. I walked by a spot for that has an application in front of the board, and I saw the posting right in front, and I thought that was an awesome thing moving forward to get the message out there, so people know that, hey, this property thing, and the mailing and all the other stuff that she echoed.
I feel as though any form of government, whether it's the Zoning Board of Appeals or the Boston City Council or anything in between, community engagement is paramount. And I think the only thing that may supersede that is transparency. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us that serve in any role as a public servant is that anything that comes before the board is done so in a very transparent manner, and then also that the community is notified, because there have been instances where I'm aware of that people find out about meetings late. Not enough notice has been given, or bare minimum. I think that does a disservice to the entire process. If there was a greater incentive paid toward notifying people, I think that would just be beneficial to everyone. So hopefully, as an appointee, I think that's something that within our purview, I would be happy to work on, to make sure that people can attend meetings, that they're aware of meetings, and that the community is thoughtfully engaged in the process.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Baker?
Thank you. So thank you for coming today. So I know, like Nadine and Ed, I know how you guys will be conflicted out with real estate. Pretty straightforward. A project here, you recuse yourself. Joe, I don't see of any place where you, unless do you do real estate?
No, I mean, I have a condo that's being built for myself. Besides that, I mean, I would assume that, I own property in the neighborhood. If the person to the left or the right or across the street from me was building, I would recuse myself, and to not sway that. I would assume that that could be the only thing I can kind of really see. Other than that, my clients don't really file for variance.
Okay, and to come back to civic engagement a little bit, I don't, and I think all of us that work within these walls have to constantly think about civic engagement, making sure that people at least know. I don't know if in your job that it's part of your job, but you could probably, working with ISD, let's get that notification process a little better. So I just kind of wanted to make that statement there. I'm good for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Baker. I want to thank and recognize Councillor Janey for joining us. Councillor Janey, any questions for these nominees?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess not so much for the nominees themselves, but, and perhaps you've covered this in the discussion. I apologize for coming late. It's been a very busy day, but I'm really interested in understanding who is being represented on our ZBA. And so I know that many folks in real estate are, and obviously we need expertise from folks who are in real estate on the ZBA, but I think it's also important to make sure that we have representation from those in our community who are fighting to preserve housing that we can all afford to live in our community. And so I'm not sure, Madam Chair, if you've had these types of questions and these discussions. If so, I'm happy to kind of review the tape. But if any of the nominees want to speak to their involvement or when it comes to affordable housing in our city, how you have engaged communities in the past and past roles that you've had, just if you could just kind of talk about that.
I'll jump in. So, Councilor, thank you for the question. I am one of the Greater Boston Real Estate Board's nominees, and I spoke a bit to this previously. One of the things that I think is very important is that although I am nominated by the Greater Boston Real Estate Board, is that also I'm a Boston resident. I've lived here my entire life. Council Flaherty had mentioned it earlier that he does not recall a time where there was a nominee or a board member from East Boston. That is something that I take great pride in. So I live there, and I guess as a matter of point, my parents live there. Thankfully, my grandmother still lives there, family, friends. So although I am coming from a real estate background, and prior to that I was in public service, we see the impacts that the community, that go on in the community. I deal with folks that honestly have no choice but to sell their house in some occasions. I've worked with folks that we've done our best to help them save their house. I have gone back and forth with banks numerous times. People have had foreclosure issues. This may sound strange coming from a realtor, but there are many times I have told people not to sell their house. And we do our best to keep them there. So for me, for someone who lives in East Boston, who lives in the city of Boston, whose family lives in the city of Boston, for someone who wants to continue to live in the city of Boston and raise a family, I think it's important that we all do our best to make sure that the city is inclusive of people of all facets of life. So that's something that I think is very important.
Does anyone else want to jump in? I have a follow-up.
Yeah, as somebody in the real estate profession, we see it every day that, and myself, if I didn't purchase a home and have the benefit of equity, if I were a first-time home buyer, I would not be looking to purchase a home in the city of Boston. I simply would not be able to afford it. So it is very present. We work with first-time home buyers and renters that are simply priced out. And what we are seeing also is that renters cannot afford to rent in the city. And what has happened is, I live in Dorchester, in the Savin Hill neighborhood, and families cannot afford to rent in the triple-decker because there are no one-bedroom units for people to rent. So what happens is you have 3 people, generally in their 20s, and they can afford $800, $900 a month. So what happens is they can rent a triple-decker with 3 bedrooms, and they can afford $3,000 a month. So what it's doing is pushing people out of those triple-deckers because they can no longer afford $3,000 a month for rent. So I do see it very much. I see the effects of the lack of certain types of housing stock. So I think it really actually has prepared me very well to see what types of housing stock that is needed in certain parts of the city. And I think it has prepared me well for serving on this board in that capacity as well.
All right. So let me just, if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, my experience with the ZBA and following development projects in my district, there are, neighbors who will come out to the meetings very frustrated that their voices are not being heard, that they feel that the ZBA is not being responsive to the concerns that they are raising. And so I just want to bring that up. And so it's important that if we are going to have a zoning board of appeals, that we know that this is an independent body, independent from the mayor, and independent in terms of really looking at each case and making sure that you are listening to the residents in our neighborhoods around development that is happening in our neighborhoods. And so I really would love for someone to speak to, in a little more depth, your own view and position, where you are in terms of your independence from the mayor and your willingness to listen to residents as they come before you when different developers are seeking variances.
Well, I think every project, as has been mentioned, it needs to be weighed on the public good. So I think, given the testimony, I think you have to look at, is it going to benefit the public good? Is it going to make housing more affordable, more accessible? And, not every project that comes through is going to be housing as well. So I think that's also in the broader scope of things too. But, is the project going to be for the greater good? And is the city of Boston being built for the people that are going to be in the city, using the city, and living in the city?
Anyone else want to speak to their independence?
Yeah, I thank you for the question, Counselor. As one of the representatives that will be a community nominee to this zoning board, it's of utmost importance that I take into consideration the way the community feels on particular developments in relation to the zoning case at hand and the merits of the variances requested. I've had the pleasure and privilege to go to various neighborhood groups throughout the city and hear that same frustration and make sure, when I worked for the city, we did a municipal parking lot restoration over in Mattapan, and being able to do site visits with the residents and being able for them to actually impact very specifics on what they wanted was what it was all about, and making sure it was a success. So residency, the abutters and the residents, their voice needs to be heard and needs to be taken into consideration, specifically direct abutters, people that have to live with whatever the proposal is on a daily basis. and really making sure that their voices are heard, both for and opposition. I've also seen just in neighborhood groups where direct abutters are supportive of a project. They believe it's going to make their property value better, but someone, you know, a quarter mile down the street is in opposition because they think it's too dense. And it's like, the direct abutter is going to be the one most affected. Their property values are going to, if that's really what they care about, and you know, making sure that their voices are heard and protected, both in the majority and minority, sometimes to hear from all.
And I guess just to circle back on that, I had mentioned before in a previous comment that I think anytime anyone is in a role where they are in public service, they're serving the greater good of the community. And I don't view the ZBA any differently. It's my understanding that there is a lot of autonomy granted to the zoning board, and I had mentioned to Councilor Edwards, I also think it's a collective effort where the board has to work with the community, with the city council, with the administration, and all other interested parties. So for me, that's my understanding of it, that all cases should be based on merits. All decisions should be based on the merit of the proposal, and that is my takeaway from it, and that's my understanding going forward. And that is how I plan on, if I'm fortunate enough to be appointed, that's how I plan on serving on the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Janey. So just actually to go back to the first question that Councillor Janey had posed and kind of summarize, and it relates to something I'm going to ask, I promise. The way the members are nominated is very strictly defined by statute, and so the 7 seats are essentially one real estate person, one architect, 2 out of somehow affiliated with the trades, either Boston Building Trades or state level, 1 at-large candidate, and then 2 representing neighborhood groups. So the split among the 7 is really 4 who are tied to some industry with financial stake in development, and 3 kind of representing the community side. So these community voices, those seats are incredibly important, particularly when it is a minority of the seat. I mean, not to say that the real estate representative isn't of the community and everyone has to be a Boston resident, but it is just for even the perception of community to feel like they have a voice, so important. So I want to ask all of you, but I'm going to focus especially on our community nominee. You know, there is just a mass displacement happening across Boston right now. What will you see as your responsibility, should you get confirmed, in this role to address that?
So as Councilor Edwards earlier spoke in this hearing about like asking those developers if they've taken things into consideration. You know, we see 9-unit proposals all the time. We see it all the time, and really, and it's that tough balance where it's the neighborhood doesn't want density, but we need to address the displacement issue, and really listening to the cues from the community on where maybe they would be more open to density to try to help offset the displacement issue. I mean, in my professional, I deal with people from all levels of the economic hierarchy, for lack of a better word, in East Boston, and I'm very often sitting across from the table from a family who can barely afford to pay their rent, never mind deal with one of like the worst situations life's ever treated them. So I've seen firsthand the struggles of a lot of people in the neighborhood, and I've heard the stories of people that have had to move to Chelsea, to Lynn, to Lowell and Lawrence, and quadruple their commute now down to work the jobs that are in the city that can, and so seeing that and really asking those questions at the zoning board to make sure that developers are at least thinking about it.
So, Mr. Ruggiero, when you just said that you want to listen to the cues about where the community will want density, do you feel any responsibility to make sure that development is happening somewhere?
Yeah, I believe that in order for the city to move forward and in order for the city to address some of the needs, that development is a necessary thing to move the city forward.
Okay. And so then, given that, how do you weigh community feedback versus that responsibility that you feel to see development happen somewhere in the city?
I believe I believe you need to you need to weigh everything on a case-by-case basis and really see where the community supports development and where they don't. And like, I know East Boston, a lot of the times it's, on the major streets and the major squares, the community seems to support more there than they do inside the neighborhood, per se. But, working and listening to the community on what's acceptable and what's not to them, and really echoing that concern.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't mean to pick on you, so I do want to hear from the other two as well. A response on the, what's your role in gentrification and displacement?
I'm happy to jump in, but I'll defer to you.
Thank you. That is a tough question. I think gentrification, it's a very tough thing for us as a committee to address. I think that's a larger policy issue that, as counselors and leaders, that's something that may be better for that to be addressed on a higher level, and for us to take the lead as from the City Council and from the leadership. I think it's, from a board's perspective, is to listen to the community and listen to their concerns, because they're real. I think there's definitely a lot of fear that a brand-new shiny building is going to come in, and the little corner store that everybody is used to going to, that they know where everything is, and that is all going to go away, and their way of life is going to disappear. I think that fear is real, and I think it does happen. I think there is a balance. I think there is some blending of old and new that can happen, and I think with smart development, that can happen. I think we've kind of seen it in some areas. I think that is where kind of zoning that can kind of come in and dovetail some of that. And I think really listening to the community and approving projects that really kind of try to preserve some of the old and new can keep some of that, the cultural gentrification at bay. I think it's, if you do nothing, I think you will just, the steamroll, gentrification will come and steamroll, and people will buy up all the property, and that you can't help. That's market forces. If we do nothing and build nothing, the highest bidder will always win. So we do need to produce housing. We do need to increase our supply. Our population is growing. Those are facts that we can't ignore. We just need to be smart about it, and that's my feelings about it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think development, the term, the word, has this sort of negative connotation all of a sudden. And I can see why. I can see the frustration in folks that see their neighborhoods changing right before their eyes. Stores closed, people move out, houses that were, as a kid, I'll go back, a three-family, a triple-decker, it was, someone's aunt, you, and then your grandmother on the third floor. I mean, that's how it was for a lot of us. I also remember in the late 80s and the early 90s when a lot of those buildings were empty and a lot of those storefronts were empty. And to see the transformation in Boston, particularly in the neighborhood that I live in, East Boston, is remarkable. I remember during my time working in the legislature with Senator Petrocelli that there was a great demand for waterfront development in East Boston. It was something that had been passed over in previous administrations from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. We're finally starting to see that. We're seeing the fruits of that labor for all those years for people who fought for that. So that being said, I think that development can be positive in the sense that you take land that was not very useful for people for a long time, and you create housing. That people can live there. People want to live in the city of Boston. It's a great city. It's in demand. I see it every day, particularly in my neighborhood of East Boston. I would say the majority of people that I work with to buy homes in East Boston, a lot of them aren't from the neighborhood originally. They're from out of state, or they're from out of country. And I don't see that as a negative. I see that as as something that shows how far the city has come, that people want to live here. That being said, I think development has to be done responsibly. I think that is the key term, that all efforts have to be made to keep people in their neighborhoods if they want to stay. If there are people who want to stay in a home that they've been in for 30, 40 years, generational homes, in neighborhoods that they feel comfortable in neighborhoods where they know the corner store, things of that nature, I think it's incumbent upon developers, elected officials, the community as a whole, to sort of make sure that's done in a way where that's possible. That's probably a bit of a pipe dream. I'm sure it sounds better in theory, but there are steps to be taken where I think it's important that there's a number of affordable housing units. That, again, it's done, the best way I can describe it is done in a very responsible, community-driven, thoughtful manner. That is what I think would be of most benefit from my perspective.
Thank you. And sorry, I just had one last question. I know my colleagues have more as well. So kind of, again, blending a larger issue that was brought up earlier with a specific question. Councilor Janey had brought up independence, and I'm curious about that in context of the cannabis buffer zone policy question that has come up again and again. And this, to our two East Boston residents, this is particularly relevant to you all in your neighborhood life. Curious to hear your view of your interpretation of that half-mile buffer rule. Should both applicants, and you don't have to talk about this specific case, but because this is going to be a question citywide, should two applicants who are coming to you as new applicants within a half mile of each other be allowed to both receive permits? Or do you respect the intent that the council had when we had all these hearings, that the half-mile radius was meant to spread out more equitably the dispensaries, that the administration actually respected when they came before the council hearing after hearing, talking about it the same way, and now all of a sudden there's a new interpretation that it turns on the word existing. So what is your interpretation, and would you be willing to push back and say this was actually a mistake, not on the ZBA, but someone else who put it before you, and now there's sort of this arbitrary order?
So I guess my question to this, I believe the intent of it is that there aren't supposed to be two dispensaries within a half mile of each other. I believe that that's the intent of it. My question is the process, and it was mentioned earlier today, is often you see things zoned and permitted that never get built, that never come, that never happen. So I need to educate myself on what the process is, and like when you get zoning approval, do you immediately get a license the next day? I don't believe that that's the case. So what's the process, and does the city have a stopgap on the back end the day before that license is issued?
You all are it. ZBA is it. They have gone through the state. They have gone through so much. They have invested thousands of dollars in their other permits, in rent, and so you all are the backstop.
I will be frank that I don't think I have, frankly, enough information to speak eloquently on it. However, what I had mentioned in my opening statement, I'm very much open to obviously learning and educating myself on it. So if that is a dialogue with you and fellow members of the council and interested parties, I am more than open to doing that. I would look forward to it, and that would be something that I think would help me as a board member, and to help me make this decision is to learn more about it through dialogue with the council and interested parties.
Thank you. Ms. Fallon?
I'd like to just repeat, I don't know enough about the specific situation. I think from what I've heard today, the process may have not worked perfectly, and I think what it says is like, okay, we need to just tighten up our process, maybe fix what happened here, and then come up with just a cleaner process, and then just move forward.
Great, thank you. No, I appreciate that, and no disrespect to the members who spoke before, but I do think that it is not about a case by case here. It is about this larger question, and I proudly voted for legalization. I have no issue with the businesses, et cetera, but I see this also as the will of the council, and therefore the people who participated in that legislative process, having set up a buffer zone, now being kind of tossed aside potentially because of a mistake that should be addressed. So that is my soapbox. Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. I just wanted to just get a quick yes or no response to this. So, and because I would say honestly, majority of the back of the emails that I've gotten have been about the theme of independence. So just yes or no, are you going to be a rubber stamp for Mayor Walsh?
No.
No.
I didn't,
No, I said no.
okay, thank
I
you.
thought we were going to go one at a time.
No, I was
unison
surprised. It
thing.
was resoundingly all together.
Yeah,
No, that's
yeah,
very
okay.
nice.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had, and I just want to make sure, Joe, you address this particular concern that is, as you know, your brother works for the BPDA, and he's part of the process for Plan East Boston. And so here he is part of helping East Boston set new zoning, set new guidelines, and move forward. It's a process I fully support, right? So this is a good thing. And so we have your brother on the helping the plan, and we have now another person in the family who's going to be looking at variances potentially to that plan or to what people are looking at. So talk to me about how we tell East Boston folks or folks in Boston that this is not a conflict, this how you're going to approach this, the variances and the setting of the rules in your department and different from your brother.
Yeah,
I swear, it didn't make this up. I've had to deal with this, and I'm trying to make sure.
I mean, I don't understand where we're coming from on this. I will be looking, if appointed to this board, we're looking at zoning throughout the entire city of Boston, East Boston being one ward of the, 20 whatever wards there are. And that all being said, that process that's going on is going to take a while, and people are worried about my brother telling me how to vote on a variance or being swayed by him. That it just won't happen. If that's the question, I guess.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sometimes we just need to get things on the record
Yeah,
when it's in
yeah,
a public
yeah.
forum.
Put it
so-
out there.
Yeah. You good, Councilor
I'm
Edwards?
good.
Okay. Councilor Baker?
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to get something on the record. So the last time this board was really under the control of the mayor was the last administration. If anybody remembers that last administration, nothing moved, nothing happened unless it was an okay from the fifth floor. They used it to artificially hold the real estate market down. They used it a way to pay retribution. Literally at the funeral, the chief of staff was joking about how they withheld permits and variances on people. So the result of this board being independent is what we see out here now, is the building that's happening. So, I mean, I don't know what people are trying to get at, but if they remember the Menino administration, that's when the board was totally in the tank, and it, quite frankly, hurt the city. Our budgets back then were constantly, how many layoffs this year? Every year was layoffs. I worked with your grandfather. He retired. I got laid off right after he left. So the building that happens now, and Ed, you touched on it, the building that happens now is helping us to come into the 21st century. We've talked about for years being a world-class city. Guess what? We're a world-class city now, and that's why everybody wants to be here, and we need to build for the people that are coming here. And you talked about corner stores and everything like this. As a district city council, one of the things that I'm proud of is a developer coming in. He was displacing a corner store that, quite frankly, helped to feed my family. I'm 50, helped to feed my family for 70 years. Part of the deal was you let that guy go back in there, and then we can talk. So part of what we do, I think, is to help you guys. When they leave our office, they should be better products coming to you guys, and more of just statements, Madam Chair. But I plan on voting in favor of all three of these applicants here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Juan, just a final check, no one else signed for, okay, we had no more folks signed up for public testimony, so I want to thank you three very much for your time and your patience. You're at the end of the lineup, and for taking the time to answer our questions.
Great, thank you so much.
So this will conclude the City Council's hearing on dockets number 0338 through 0342 and 0775 through 0777, appointments to the Boston Audit Committee and the Zoning Board of Appeals. This hearing is adjourned.